January 15, 2019. In a nondescript office building in The Hague, Netherlands, a junior intelligence analyst named Maria Hendricks sat before 3 computer monitors, her eyes scanning lines of encrypted text that would eventually expose one of the most sophisticated human trafficking networks ever discovered. The morning had started like any other, with routine monitoring of dark web forums known to facilitate illegal activities. But what Hendricks stumbled upon that Tuesday morning would set in motion an international investigation spanning 3 continents and involving law enforcement agencies from 17 countries. The encrypted forum she had penetrated, operating under the innocuous name Global Solutions Network, contained thousands of posts written in coded language that, once deciphered, revealed a chilling marketplace where human beings were bought, sold, and traded like commodities. The posts discussed packages arriving from various Southeast Asian countries, quality ratings based on age and physical characteristics, and delivery schedules that coordinated the movement of victims across international borders. Hendricks immediately flagged the discovery and escalated it to her supervisor at Europol's European Migrant Smuggling Center, triggering what would become Operation Dark Market, one of the most extensive coordinated efforts to dismantle digital human trafficking networks in modern history. The investigation began slowly, methodically, as analysts worked to understand the scope and structure of what they were dealing with. Throughout late January and into February 2019, Europol coordinated with Interpol, the FBI's Violent Crimes Against Children section, and various national police forces to build a comprehensive picture of the network's operations. What emerged was staggering in its complexity and brazenness. The encrypted forums operated across multiple platforms, utilizing sophisticated encryption protocols and cryptocurrency transactions to maintain anonymity. The traffickers communicated using a mixture of coded language, emoji sequences, and obscure cultural references that required linguistic experts and cryptographers to decode. By February 28, 2019, investigators had identified at least 6 major forums operating simultaneously, each specializing in different aspects of the trafficking trade. Some focused exclusively on forced labor, advertising victims for agricultural work, domestic servitude, or factory employment in countries with lax labor enforcement. Others specialized in sexual exploitation, with detailed catalogs describing victims by age, nationality, physical appearance, and language abilities. The most disturbing discovery was a forum section dedicated to custom orders, where buyers could specify exact characteristics they desired, and traffickers would actively recruit or abduct individuals matching those specifications. March 12, 2019 marked a significant breakthrough when German federal police, working in conjunction with Europol, successfully infiltrated one of the forums by posing as potential buyers. The undercover operation, codenamed Silent Purchase, allowed investigators to observe transactions in real time and track communication patterns between traffickers and customers. The intelligence gathered during this period revealed that the network operated with business-like efficiency, complete with customer service representatives, dispute resolution mechanisms, and even user reviews rating the reliability of various traffickers. One particularly chilling exchange, later entered as evidence in court proceedings, showed a buyer from Belgium complaining that the delivery from Thailand did not match the promised specifications, and requesting either a refund or replacement. The trafficker's response was coldly professional, apologizing for the quality control issue and offering a discount on future purchases. These conversations, occurring in plain digital sight, yet hidden behind layers of encryption and anonymity, illustrated how human trafficking had evolved into a sophisticated e-commerce operation, complete with market dynamics, competitive pricing, and supply chain management. The dehumanization was absolute. Victims were reduced to product listings with SKU numbers, descriptions, and price points denominated in Bitcoin and Monero. As spring 2019 progressed, the investigation expanded dramatically. April 7, 2019 saw Thai Royal Police join the operation after Europol shared intelligence suggesting that several trafficking rings were operating out of Bangkok, Pattaya, and the northern provinces bordering Myanmar and Laos. Thai authorities had long struggled with human trafficking, both as a source country for victims and as a transit point for trafficking operations, moving people from neighboring countries to global destinations. The encrypted forums revealed that Thailand served as a crucial hub in the network's operations, with multiple traffickers advertising fresh inventory from rural villages in northeastern Thailand, Myanmar's Shan State, and Cambodia's border provinces. Detective Colonel Somchai Watanakul, who led the Thai investigation team, later testified in court that the forums contained more than 3,000 individual postings related to Thailand alone, spanning a 3-year period from 2016 to 2019. Many of these postings included photographs of victims, their faces sometimes blurred or cropped, but their bodies displayed like merchandise in a catalog. The ages ranged from teenagers to adults in their 30s, though investigators suspected many of the stated ages were falsified to make older minors appear to be legal adults. The pricing varied wildly, from as little as $800 for forced labor victims to over $15,000 for young women destined for high-end prostitution networks in European and Middle Eastern cities. Throughout April and May 2019, the investigation team worked tirelessly to map the network's structure and identify key players. Unlike traditional organized crime networks with clear hierarchical leadership, this operation functioned more like a decentralized marketplace, similar to eBay or Amazon, where multiple independent traffickers operated alongside larger, more organized criminal syndicates. May 20th, 2019 brought another crucial development when Filipino law enforcement, coordinating with Interpol's Manila office, identified a suspected trafficking operation in Angeles City, a location notorious for sex tourism and exploitation. The operation, run by a 47-year-old Australian expatriate named Marcus Webb and his Filipino partner, 32-year-old Cristina Reyes, had been advertising victims on the encrypted forums under the username Pacific Supply. Surveillance of Webb's compound revealed a pattern of young women and girls entering the property but rarely being seen leaving. Neighbors reported that Webb claimed to run a modeling agency, but the only clients seen visiting the property were middle-aged foreign men, arriving at various hours. The Philippine National Police, in coordination with the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, began building a case against Webb and Reyes, gathering evidence that would eventually connect them to at least 18 victims trafficked between 2017 and 2019. June 15, 2019, marked the first significant tactical operation when Romanian authorities, acting on intelligence provided by Europol, raided a farmhouse in the Teleorman County countryside, approximately 80 kilometers south of Bucharest. The property, owned by the Popescu crime family, was suspected of holding forced labor victims recruited from Moldova and Ukraine. The raid, conducted at dawn by DICAT, Romania's Directorate for Investigating Organized Crime and Terrorism officers, uncovered 17 victims, 12 men and 5 women living in squalid conditions in converted agricultural buildings. The victims, ranging in age from 19 to 43, had been forced to work in agricultural labor, packaging and processing operations in construction sites throughout Romania and neighboring countries. Several victims showed signs of physical abuse, and medical examinations revealed chronic malnutrition and untreated injuries. The rescued individuals told investigators they had been recruited through false job advertisements promising well-paying construction and agricultural work in Western Europe. Upon arrival in Romania, their passports were confiscated, they were beaten into submission, and they were told they owed thousands of euros for transportation and housing costs that could only be repaid through forced labor. The Popescu operation had been active on the encrypted forums, advertising reliable workers available for temporary contracts to buyers across Europe. Digital forensics revealed that the family had profited approximately 400,000 euros over 3 years through this forced labor operation. The Romanian raid made international news, though initial media reports did not reveal the connection to the broader encrypted forum investigation. June 18, 2019, The Guardian published a front-page story titled, "Modern Slavery Uncovered, Romanian Farm Workers Rescued from Forced Labor," detailing the conditions discovered at the Popescu property and interviewing several victims who described their ordeal. The article quoted Maria Ionescu, a 28-year-old Moldovan woman who had been held at the farm for 14 months. "They told us, if we tried to escape or contact authorities, they would find our families back home. They showed us pictures of our houses, our parents, our children. We believed they could hurt them. So we stayed and worked. Every day, we worked from before sunrise until after dark. They fed us scraps and locked us in at night like animals. The Guardian's investigation, while powerful, only scratched the surface of what law enforcement had uncovered. The encrypted forums revealed that the Popescu operation was just one small node in a vast network that moved thousands of victims annually across European borders. The forums even contained discussions about the Romanian operation specifically, with one trafficker warning others on June 16, 2019, that the Teleorman operation is compromised and advising associates to avoid Romanian routes for the next few months until things cool down. As summer progressed, the investigation intensified across multiple fronts. July 22, 2019 brought a major breakthrough when cybersecurity experts at Europol successfully de-anonymized several forum administrators by exploiting a vulnerability in the encryption protocol they were using. This technical achievement allowed investigators to identify real-world identities behind some of the usernames that had been most active in facilitating trafficking transactions. Among those identified was a 34-year-old software engineer named Dmitry Volkov, living in Riga, Latvia, who had been operating under the username Secure Connect. Forensic analysis of Volkov's digital footprint revealed he was not directly involved in trafficking humans himself, but rather provided the technical infrastructure that enabled the forums to operate securely. He had designed custom encryption software, managed server infrastructure, and provided technical support to forum users, earning cryptocurrency payments for his services. Latvian authorities placed Volkov under surveillance while investigators built a comprehensive case against him. The decision to monitor rather than immediately arrest him proved strategically valuable, as Volkov's communications led investigators to other technical facilitators and revealed the locations of additional server infrastructure supporting the network. August 5, 2019 saw Belgian federal police raiding an apartment in the Brussels suburb of Molenbeek, arresting 41-year-old Karim Hassan and his brother, 38-year-old Youssef Hassan, who had been operating as intermediaries in the trafficking network. The Hassan brothers had been using the encrypted forums to connect Eastern European and Southeast Asian traffickers with buyers throughout Western Europe, essentially functioning as brokers in the human trafficking marketplace. Seized documents and digital devices revealed the brothers had facilitated the trafficking of at least 43 individuals over a 4-year period, earning approximately 300,000 euros in commissions. The arrest of the Hassan brothers generated significant media attention in Belgium, with Le Soir newspaper publishing an extensive investigation on August 8, 2019, titled "Brussels Brothers Arrested in International Human Trafficking Operation." The article detailed how the brothers had exploited Belgium's position as a European Union hub and transportation crossroads to facilitate the movement of trafficking victims throughout the continent. Belgian prosecutors announced they would seek maximum sentences under the country's human trafficking laws, which carried penalties of up to 20 years imprisonment. The Hassan case also revealed the international nature of the investigation for the first time, with prosecutors acknowledging they were working with multiple international law enforcement agencies on a coordinated operation targeting human trafficking networks. The investigation in Southeast Asia had been progressing parallel to European operations, though with considerably more complexity due to factors including corruption, limited resources, and the vast geographic area involved. August 20, 2019 marked a crucial development when Vietnamese police, working with Interpol's Hanoi office, identified a trafficking network operating in Ho Chi Minh City that had been recruiting young women from rural provinces with false promises of legitimate employment in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. The network, led by a woman known as Sister Lan, later identified as 52-year-old Nguyen T. Len, had been active on the encrypted forums under multiple usernames, advertising Vietnamese women and girls for both forced labor and sexual exploitation. Vietnamese investigators faced unique challenges, as many victims came from impoverished rural areas where families were sometimes complicit in their daughters' trafficking, having accepted advance payments or been promised remittances from the victims' employment abroad. The cultural dimensions of trafficking in Vietnam, where poverty, traditional gender roles, and limited economic opportunities created vulnerabilities that traffickers expertly exploited, required investigators to approach cases with sensitivity while still pursuing justice. Surveillance of Sister Lan's operation revealed she worked with a network of recruiters in rural provinces who identified potential victims, transporters who moved victims across borders, and corrupt officials who facilitated illegal border crossings and produced fraudulent documents. September 10, 2019, brought international media attention to the investigation when the New York Times published a major investigative report titled "The Dark Web's Most Disturbing Marketplace: How Encrypted Forums Enable Human Trafficking." The article, based on leaked information from sources close to the investigation, detailed how technology had transformed human trafficking from a primarily local or regional crime into a global enterprise operating with unprecedented scale and efficiency. The Times report quoted Dr. Sarah Chin, a human trafficking expert at the University of London, who stated, "What we're seeing is the Uberization of human trafficking. These encrypted forums have created a marketplace that connects supply and demand across international borders, reducing the risks for traffickers while dramatically expanding their potential customer base. The anonymity provided by encryption and cryptocurrency allows traffickers to operate openly, advertising their victims like any other commodity, while remaining beyond the reach of law enforcement." The article sparked international outrage and renewed calls for stronger measures to combat online human trafficking. However, it also created complications for the ongoing investigation, as increased media attention made some traffickers more cautious and drove some forum activity to even more obscure corners of the dark web. As autumn arrived, investigators had assembled a comprehensive picture of the network's operations and were preparing for a coordinated series of arrests. October 3, 2019, saw a critical planning meeting at Europol headquarters in The Hague, where representatives from 17 countries gathered to coordinate what would be called Operation Fortress, a synchronized action targeting the network simultaneously across multiple countries. The operation required extraordinary logistical coordination, as arrests would need to occur within a narrow time window to prevent targets from warning each other and destroying evidence. Europol's press release, issued weeks later after the operation concluded, described the planning phase. Investigators from across Europe and Southeast Asia worked in unprecedented coordination, sharing real-time intelligence and synchronizing operational plans across vastly different legal systems, time zones, and jurisdictional boundaries. This level of international cooperation represents a new paradigm in fighting transnational organized crime. The planning meeting established November 13, 2019, as the target date for synchronized raids, giving operational teams 5 weeks to finalize surveillance, secure warrants, and position assets. October 28, 2019, brought unexpected complications when Thai authorities, acting on unrelated intelligence about a potential trafficking situation, raided a property in Pattaya that was under surveillance as part of Operation Fortress. The premature raid, though well-intentioned, threatened to compromise the broader investigation by potentially alerting other network members. The property, a 3-story building in a residential neighborhood near Pattaya's Beach Road, yielded 8 victims, 6 women from Myanmar and 2 from Laos, who had been held in deplorable conditions and forced into prostitution. The raid also resulted in the arrest of 56-year-old Sompong Thaksin and 2 associates. While the immediate rescue of 8 victims was certainly a positive outcome, investigators worried that news of the raid might cause other traffickers to heighten security measures or destroy evidence. Emergency communications between Europol, Interpol, and Thai authorities resulted in a decision to accelerate the timeline for Operation Fortress, moving the coordinated raids from November 13th to November 6th, 2019. This accelerated timeline meant operational teams had just 8 days to finalize preparations that had been planned for 5 weeks. The compressed timeline created intense pressure on investigators across all participating countries. November 1st, 2019, saw a flurry of activity as operational teams conducted final surveillance, confirmed target locations, and secured last-minute judicial authorizations. In Germany, federal prosecutors filed formal charges against 14 individuals, requesting arrest warrants and search warrants for properties in Hamburg, Berlin, Frankfurt, and Munich. Dutch authorities prepared to raid locations in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. British police finalized plans for operations in London, Birmingham, and Manchester. In Southeast Asia, coordinated preparations were underway in Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar, though the latter two countries had limited formal participation due to governance challenges and resource constraints. The scale of Operation Fortress was unprecedented. Investigators planned to simultaneously execute 87 search warrants and arrest warrants across 12 countries, deploy over 600 law enforcement officers, and had resources ready to provide immediate assistance to potentially hundreds of trafficking victims. November 6, 2019, the day of Operation Fortress began at precisely 5 a.m. Central European Time, with synchronized raids commencing across Europe and Southeast Asia. In Latvia, special forces surrounded Dmitry Volkov's apartment building in Riga, arresting the software engineer without incident as he sat before his computers. Forensic specialists immediately began imaging his hard drives and seizing servers that hosted portions of the encrypted forum infrastructure. Simultaneously in Brussels, Belgian federal police arrested 6 individuals connected to trafficking operations, including several associates of the previously arrested Hassan brothers. In Germany, the most extensive operations unfolded across multiple cities. Hamburg police raided a luxury apartment building in the Blankenese district, arresting 48-year-old businessman Klaus Richter, who had been using the encrypted forums to purchase victims for sexual exploitation. In Berlin, officers raided the offices of a freight logistics company that had been facilitating the transportation of trafficking victims across European borders, arresting the company's owner and 3 employees. Frankfurt police executed warrants at residential properties and business locations connected to a network that had been trafficking Nigerian women into forced prostitution across Germany. The Southeast Asian operations, occurring simultaneously in local time zones, proved even more dramatic and yielded the highest number of victim rescues. In Angeles City, Philippines, a joint operation involving Philippine National Police, National Bureau of Investigation agents, and representatives from the Interagency Council Against Trafficking raided the compound operated by Marcus Webb and Christina Reyes. The raid, which began at 6 a.m. local time, encountered resistance from armed security guards employed by Webb. After a tense standoff lasting approximately 40 minutes, officers breached the compound and found 9 young women, ages 16 to 23, being held in locked rooms. Webb and Reyes were arrested, along with 3 security guards and 2 individuals identified as recruiters who had been present at the property. Medical personnel and social workers accompanied the raiding party to provide immediate assistance to the rescued victims, who were found in various states of physical and psychological distress. One victim, later identified in court documents only as Maria T., to protect her identity, told investigators she had been held at the compound for 19 months after responding to an advertisement for restaurant work in Manila. Instead, she was transported to Angeles City, had her identification documents confiscated, and was forced into prostitution, serving customers who had contacted Webb through the encrypted forums. In Thailand, operations unfolded across multiple locations. Bangkok police raided an apartment complex in the Lat Phrao district, arresting 5 individuals and rescuing 12 victims from Myanmar and Laos. In Pattaya, despite the premature raid on October 28th, investigators executed warrants at 3 additional locations, finding evidence of continued trafficking operations and rescuing 4 more victims. Thai police also arrested a corrupt immigration official at Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport who had been facilitating illegal border crossings for trafficking networks in exchange for payments. The official, whose name was withheld pending formal charges, had allegedly processed fraudulent documents and turned a blind eye to obviously suspicious travel patterns involving young women traveling with older male guardians on one-way tickets. In Chiang Mai, northern Thailand, officers raided a recruiting operation that had been targeting young women from ethnic minority communities in the mountainous border regions. The recruiters had been promising employment in Bangkok hotels and restaurants, but were instead delivering victims to trafficking networks, advertising on the encrypted forums. 7 victims were rescued from a safe house in Chiang Mai, while investigators issued warrants for 3 recruiters who had fled into Myanmar before the raid. The Vietnamese operations, centered in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, resulted in the arrest of Nguyen Thi Lan's sister Lan and 17 members of her trafficking network. The coordinated raids across multiple locations in southern Vietnam rescued 23 victims who were in various stages of the trafficking process, from recent recruits undergoing training to individuals being prepared for transportation abroad. Vietnamese investigators also seized extensive documentation, including handwritten ledgers detailing payments to and from various parties in the trafficking chain, photographs, and biographical information on dozens of victims, and communications with buyers and intermediaries in other countries. The evidence painted a picture of a highly organized operation that had been trafficking Vietnamese women and girls for at least 7 years, generating estimated profits of over $2 million. Vietnamese authorities also arrested 3 local officials, 2 police officers, and 1 customs official who had been providing protection to Sister Lan's operation in exchange for monthly payments. The arrests of corrupt officials represented a significant development in Vietnam's ongoing struggle against endemic corruption that facilitated trafficking and other forms of organized crime. November 7, 2019, as news of the coordinated raid spread, media coverage exploded across international news outlets. The BBC led with, "International Operation Dismantles Human Trafficking Network Across 3 Continents," reporting that coordinated police operations across Europe and Southeast Asia have resulted in the arrest of more than 60 individuals and the rescue of over 150 victims of human trafficking. The report included statements from Europol's executive director, Catherine de Boll, who declared, "Yesterday's operations represent an extraordinary success for international law enforcement cooperation. The criminals who were arrested believed they were operating beyond the reach of justice, hidden behind encryption and anonymity. Today's actions demonstrate that there is no dark corner of the internet where we cannot reach those who exploit the vulnerable." The Guardian published detailed coverage, including photographs of raids in progress and interviews with law enforcement officials involved in the operation. The New York Times coverage focused particularly on the technology aspects, detailing how sophisticated encryption had enabled the marketplace to flourish and how investigators had overcome technical obstacles to identify and locate traffickers. Asian media provided extensive coverage with particular focus on regional aspects of the operation. The Bangkok Post published a comprehensive report on November 8, 2019, detailing the Thai operations and interviewing Colonel Somchai Watanakul, who stated, "Human trafficking has been a persistent problem in Thailand for decades. But what we discovered in this investigation represents an evolution we had not previously encountered. The use of encrypted digital forums has industrialized trafficking, creating a marketplace mentality that strips away any remaining humanity from these transactions. The victims are treated purely as commodities, with pricing based on characteristics like age, appearance, and perceived vulnerability. It is deeply disturbing, but it also demonstrates why international cooperation is essential. These networks operate globally, and only through coordinated action can we effectively combat them." The Philippine Daily Inquirer's coverage highlighted the arrest of Marcus Webb, an Australian expatriate, noting the recurring pattern of foreign nationals establishing trafficking operations in Southeast Asian countries where they exploit local poverty and weak regulatory enforcement. As November progressed, prosecutors across multiple jurisdictions began filing formal charges and building cases against arrested individuals. November 15, 2019, saw German federal prosecutors announce charges against 14 defendants on crimes including human trafficking, forced labor, sexual exploitation, and participation in a criminal organization. The announcement detailed some of the evidence collected, including encrypted forum communications, financial records showing cryptocurrency transactions, and testimony from rescued victims. Lead prosecutor Matthias Weber stated in a press conference, "The evidence we have collected reveals a network of criminals who viewed human beings as nothing more than inventory in a business transaction. The communications we recovered show traffickers discussing their victims with the same cold indifference one might expect from livestock traders. We will prosecute these cases to the fullest extent of German law, and we will seek maximum sentences to send an unmistakable message that such crimes will not be tolerated." The German cases were expected to go to trial in 2020, with proceedings anticipated to last several months, given the complexity of the evidence and the number of defendants. November 22, 2019, brought significant developments in the Philippines, where prosecutors filed trafficking charges against Marcus Webb and Cristina Reyes, along with 5 associates. The charges included human trafficking, serious illegal detention, rape, and violation of the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act of 2003. If convicted on all charges, Webb and Reyes faced possible life imprisonment without parole. The case generated significant public attention in the Philippines, where human trafficking remains a serious concern despite legislative efforts to combat it. Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo released a statement commending law enforcement for their work on the case and reiterating the Duterte administration's commitment to fighting trafficking. However, some human rights advocates expressed skepticism about whether the case would result in meaningful convictions, citing the Philippines' problematic track record of prosecuting high-profile trafficking cases. Maria Ressa, a prominent Filipino journalist, wrote in Rappler, "While we welcome the arrests in this case, we must remember that successful prosecution remains the exception rather than the rule in Philippine human trafficking cases. Conviction rates remain discouragingly low, and sentenced traffickers often serve only minimal time before being released. The true test will be whether this case results in substantial prison sentences that demonstrate serious consequences for these crimes." The Belgian prosecution of the Hassan brothers and their associates moved forward with charges filed on December 3, 2019. The brothers faced charges including human trafficking, participating in a criminal organization, money laundering, and facilitation of illegal immigration. Belgian prosecutors presented evidence showing the brothers had facilitated the trafficking of 43 individuals between 2015 and 2019, with profits exceeding €300,000. The case was particularly notable because it highlighted the role of intermediaries in modern trafficking networks, individuals who might never physically interact with victims, but who played crucial roles in connecting traffickers with buyers and facilitating the logistical movement of victims across borders. Legal experts suggested the Hassan case could set important precedents for prosecuting facilitators and intermediaries, expanding criminal liability beyond those who directly recruited, transported, or exploited victims. Professor Antoine Duval of the Free University of Brussels noted, "The prosecution of intermediaries represents an important evolution in how we conceptualize and prosecute human trafficking. These individuals enable trafficking operations to function at scale by providing connectivity and services that individual traffickers could not replicate on their own. By targeting these enabling actors, we can potentially disrupt entire networks rather than simply arresting individual traffickers who can be easily replaced." December 10, 2019 brought troubling news when Europol announced that despite the success of Operation Fortress, forum activity had not significantly decreased. While the specific forums targeted in the investigation had been taken offline, new forums had emerged to fill the void, some operated by traffickers who had evaded arrest. The announcement noted that the human trafficking marketplace has demonstrated troubling resilience, with criminal actors adapting quickly to law enforcement actions and reconstituting their operations on alternative platforms. This development sparked debates about the effectiveness of enforcement-focused strategies versus approaches that addressed root causes of trafficking, including poverty, gender inequality, limited economic opportunities, and demand for trafficked labor and commercial sex. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, director of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, argued in a Financial Times opinion piece, "While we should not minimize the importance of law enforcement operations like Operation Fortress, we must acknowledge that arrests alone cannot solve the human trafficking crisis. As long as crushing poverty exists in source countries, as long as demand persists for cheap labor and commercial sex in destination countries, and as long as legal migration pathways remain limited, trafficking will continue. We need comprehensive approaches that address these root causes alongside continued enforcement efforts." The end of 2019 saw continued development of trafficking cases across multiple jurisdictions. December 20, 2019, Romanian prosecutors announced additional charges against members of the Popescu family following forensic analysis of digital devices seized during the June raid. The analysis revealed the forced labor operation had been active since at least 2014, significantly longer than initially believed, and had exploited at least 47 victims, rather than the 17 found during the raid. Prosecutors also identified connections between the Popescu operation and other trafficking networks in Romania and Moldova, suggesting the family had been part of a broader regional trafficking ecosystem. The expanded charges meant the Popescu defendants faced potentially harsher sentences, with lead prosecutor Mihai Constantin stating, "The evidence continues to reveal the true scope of this criminal enterprise. For years, the Popescu family exploited vulnerable people from across Eastern Europe, subjecting them to forced labor conditions that can only be described as modern slavery. We will pursue justice for every victim and ensure those responsible face consequences proportional to the suffering they inflicted." As 2020 began, the long process of victim recovery and prosecution continued. January 14, 2020, marked a significant moment when Thai prosecutors filed formal charges in Bangkok Criminal Court against Sompong Thaksin and 11 associates connected to trafficking operations in Pattaya. The charges included human trafficking, deprivation of liberty, facilitating prostitution, and organized crime violations. 8 victims provided testimony to prosecutors, describing their recruitment through false job offers, their transportation to Thailand, and their subsequent exploitation. The testimony proved emotionally difficult for victims, many of whom feared retaliation against themselves or family members back in Myanmar and Laos. Thai authorities provided protection and support services, but victims' advocates noted that post-trafficking support remained inadequate, with limited long-term resources available for victim rehabilitation and reintegration. Parity Soponpong, director of the Foundation for Education and Development of Rural Areas, FIDRA, criticized the Thai government's victim support framework. "We celebrate the arrests of traffickers, as we should, but we often forget that victims' trauma does not end with their rescue. Many victims face years of psychological recovery, and they often return to the same conditions of poverty and vulnerability that made them susceptible to trafficking in the first place. Without comprehensive support systems, we risk these individuals being re-trafficked or experiencing ongoing exploitation in different forms." February 6, 2020, brought the first trial to begin when proceedings commenced in Hamburg, Germany, against Klaus Richter, the businessman arrested during Operation Fortress. Richter faced 6 counts of human trafficking for sexual exploitation, relating to 6 Nigerian women he had purchased through the encrypted forums between 2017 and 2019. The prosecution presented extensive evidence, including encrypted communications recovered from Richter's devices, financial records showing cryptocurrency payments totaling approximately 80,000 euros, and testimony from 3 victims who had been exploited by Richter. The trial attracted significant media attention, with German news outlets providing daily coverage of testimony and proceedings. The victim's testimony proved particularly powerful, with one woman, identified in court documents as Witness A, describing how she had been recruited in Lagos with promises of employment as a caretaker in Germany, only to have her passport confiscated upon arrival and be forced into prostitution. She testified that Richter had been a regular customer who eventually purchased her from her traffickers, keeping her confined in his apartment for 11 months. The testimony provided a human face to what had often been described in technical, abstract terms, forcing courtroom observers to confront the real human suffering behind the encrypted forum transactions. While trials progressed in Europe, Southeast Asian prosecutions faced numerous challenges. March 3, 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic began, significantly impacting judicial proceedings across the region, with court closures and delays affecting trafficking cases. The Philippines suspended most court operations in mid-March, as Manila and surrounding areas went into strict lockdown. Thailand similarly suspended criminal proceedings except for urgent matters. Vietnam maintained limited court operations, but with significant delays. These disruptions meant that many trafficking cases faced postponements of months or potentially years, creating complications for both prosecution and victim recovery. Victims who had been prepared to testify found themselves in limbo, unable to move forward with their lives while cases remained pending. Some victims who had been staying in government shelters or safe houses faced extended confinements as social services were disrupted. The pandemic also exacerbated the underlying conditions that fueled trafficking, with economic devastation pushing more families into desperate poverty and creating new vulnerabilities that traffickers could exploit. Despite pandemic disruptions, some proceedings continued. April 14, 2020, The Hamburg trial of Klaus Richter concluded with a guilty verdict on all 6 counts of human trafficking for sexual exploitation. The court sentenced Richter to 12 years imprisonment, a significant sentence that prosecutors hoped would send a strong deterrent message. Judge Petra Hoffman stated in her sentencing remarks, "The defendant treated human beings as objects for his gratification, purchasing women who had been trafficked and exploited under horrific circumstances. He showed no remorse, no recognition of the suffering he caused, and no acceptance of responsibility." This sentence reflects the gravity of his crimes and society's determination that such exploitation will not be tolerated. The Richter verdict was widely reported in German media, with Der Spiegel publishing an extensive analysis on April 16, 2020, examining how the case fit into broader patterns of human trafficking and exploitation. The article included interviews with 3 of the 6 victims, all of whom had been granted protected immigration status in Germany and were receiving support services to rebuild their lives. May 22, 2020, brought mixed news from Latvia, where Dmitry Volkov accepted a plea agreement with prosecutors, pleading guilty to facilitating human trafficking through provision of technical services to trafficking networks. As part of the plea agreement, Volkov provided extensive cooperation with ongoing investigations, including detailed technical information about the encrypted forums' infrastructure and the identities of other technical facilitators he had worked with. The cooperation led to additional arrests in Ukraine, Russia, and Bulgaria. However, controversy erupted over the relatively lenient sentence Volkov received as part of the plea deal, just 4 years imprisonment with possibility of release after serving 2 years. Victims' rights advocates expressed outrage at what they perceived as inadequate consequences for someone who had enabled the trafficking of thousands of individuals. Marina Petrova, director of the Baltic Anti-Trafficking Network, argued, "Volkov's technical expertise enabled this entire criminal enterprise. Without individuals like him providing the infrastructure, these forums could not have operated at such scale." 4 years is an insult to the thousands of victims whose exploitation he facilitated. It sends entirely the wrong message about accountability for those who enable trafficking through technical means. The debate over appropriate sentences for facilitators versus direct perpetrators continued throughout summer 2020. June 30, 2020, Belgian prosecutors made headlines by seeking life imprisonment for Karim and Youssef Hassan, arguing that their role as brokers and intermediaries made them equally culpable as those who directly trafficked and exploited victims. The prosecution's argument represented a significant legal position that, if accepted by the court, could establish important precedents for prosecuting facilitators. Lead prosecutor Jean-Baptiste Moreau argued in court filings, "The defendants enabled trafficking at industrial scale. While they may not have physically confined victims or directly forced them into exploitation, their services were essential to the functioning of these networks. They profited substantially from the suffering of dozens of individuals. The law makes no distinction suggesting that facilitators should face lesser consequences than direct perpetrators, and neither should this court." The Belgian case was scheduled for trial beginning in September 2020, though pandemic-related court delays ultimately pushed proceedings into early 2021. August 11, 2020, marked a significant development when Vietnamese authorities announced the conclusion of proceedings against Nguyen Thi Lan and her trafficking network. Sister Lan received a life sentence following her conviction multiple counts of human trafficking, organized crime participation, and bribery of government officials. 17 associates received sentences ranging from 8 years to 25 years imprisonment. 3 corrupt officials who had provided protection to the operation received sentences of 7 to 12 years. The Vietnamese trial had been notable for the number of victims who provided testimony. 37 women and girls testified about their recruitment, trafficking, and exploitation. The proceedings received extensive coverage in Vietnamese media, with VN Express publishing detailed reports and including interviews with several victims about their experiences. One victim, identified only as Huong N, told reporters, "For years I carried shame about what happened to me, believing somehow it was my fault for trusting the wrong people. Seeing Sister Lan convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment has given me a sense that justice exists. It doesn't erase what happened, but it acknowledges that I was wronged, that I was a victim of criminals, not someone who made bad choices." The fall of 2020 brought additional convictions across multiple jurisdictions. September 25, 2020, a Frankfurt court convicted the owner and 3 employees of the freight logistics company that had facilitated transportation of trafficking victims across European borders. The defendants received sentences ranging from 6 to 14 years,